Dear members of the congregation, our Pope, Papa Aaron Colson, has stepped down from the throne. The chair is now empty. The throne is empty. If you would like to be the successor to Papa Aaron Colson, visit patreon.com/deepdrinks. Hey, welcome to Deep Drinks, Dr. Kip Davis. How
Good to be here.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
it's great.
How you doing?
Awesome. Thanks, David. I'm doing good. I was rocking out to "The Bastards Will Pay" by Trouble there.
You see, I think I lowered the volume too low. That was too low for me.
Maybe it was a little too low.
It probably was. Before we get started, everyone, I apologize for being absent for the last few weeks. I've had some dental surgery and some other life things going on. I just had my wisdom teeth come out a couple of days ago, and she did say that it was okay for me to drink today, my dentist.
Oh.
However, I don't think she realized that I'll be drinking Nicker from the Barrel 51% alcohol.
51.4, I believe, is what my bottle says.
Look, I haven't had any food today. I've had a coffee, and I'm hopped up on painkillers as well. So who knows what's going to happen?
This is going to be an amazing show, isn't it?
It's going to be amazing. I'll be drooling.
Yeah,
it'll be great. But what you're drinking, everyone, doesn't have to be alcoholic, of course. Whatever you're into. But
I have
this
a few things. I have a glass of water.
Oh yeah, I have water as well.
I even have a bottle of Crown Royal here, just in if because this can get a little heavy, right?
It can, yeah. It definitely. I'll definitely be pumping the brakes, like not drinking it too much today. But I'm excited for today because I've been going through your course, The Real Israelite Religions, on MVP courses, and first of all, there's like 4 hours of just background information before you even kind of start on the like. It's so. I didn't expect it to be this. You're a smart man. You know a lot of stuff.
Thank you. So everyone knows exactly what this is, right? Like this is a course I taught at university. This was thank you, Heng Fashi. So this is going to be, well, maybe there will be a little bit of new stuff here for those who have taken the course, but so this is a second year course I taught to second year undergraduates, which is why it's so long, and I taught it for 10 years. So I had lots of time to like work through it and tweak it and develop it. And then when I did when I did the filming for MVP courses, I had the opportunity to work through and change a bunch of things again. I was going to mention, like, I'm working on a book based on the course, and those first 4 lectures are the first 4 chapters of the book, and that's like the first 100 pages. So it's a lot.
I've read a little bit about that, and just quickly, is my mic better, everyone? Did my mic get better just then? Because I just realized my main mic wasn't turned on.
Oh,
everyone hear me?
Really?
Everyone good? No, it's not good. Interesting. I'll keep working
weird.
on my mic.
You sound okay to me, but I don't know.
Okay. I'll keep working on it.
Is that better? Is that better?
Does
that sound better?
That sounds worse to me. But
Oh, no.
what is that?
Okay, I'll
Claude Simeon's. Oh, Nitty says yes, that's better. So I mean, just go with
cool.
that.
All right,
Okay.
awesome. We'll go with that.
So
Sorry about that,
that's
everyone.
weird. So it's like it's bad for me, but it's good for the audience.
I
Weird.
think what's happening is there might be a bitrate problem, and everyone else like I'm not. Let's just let's just go with this for now. I'll tweak it. Just comment down below. But what I was going to show everyone is this is the course. So it's, what is it, 14 hours? As you can see, I'm only a little bit
about
the way
that.
through. I've jumped around to some of the later episodes, and you told me, you said stop. You told me to stop, and you wanted me to go in blind for the episode that we're kind of doing now, which is 3.2 Cosmos Creation Stories in context. Section 9.
Yes.
So,
yes.
I mean, how long is the episode? Is like, what, 49 minutes, and it's
what does it say? There we go.
Edited. Yeah. So
we'll probably take a little bit more time than 40 mints.
Yeah.
To get through today.
But there's recommended reading. There's the audio versions. There's the video. It's all really well edited. And the link is in the description. And if you use that link, it helps out Deep Drinks because I'm an affiliate. So if you want to sign up for this course, you like what you hear today, support Kip, support myself, support MVP courses, and enjoy it. But yeah, let's jump into it, Kip. Let's jump into your thing while I work out what's going on with my microphone.
Okay. Well, so the lecture that I thought I would give today is it's basically all about Genesis chapter 2 and 3, which is I identify it as the second creation myth in Genesis. So I mean, when we approach the book of Genesis, and when we approach this topic of creation, I think we're accustomed to thinking about Genesis 1 as a prelude to Genesis chapters 2 and 3, right? When we think, if you open up like your English Bible that's got like subject headings for the individual parts of the Bible, the stuff that editors have put in, quite often you'll get like for Genesis 1, it'll be creation. And then on Genesis 2, there's usually another heading to identify it as part of a continuation of that story. We've often think of Genesis 2 and 3 as the story of Adam and Eve, for example, or most famously, and I think we have the Apostle Paul to think of this, or to thank for this. We think of Genesis 2 and 3 as the story of the fall, right? It is quite often how it gets identified, the story of the fall of man. Actually, why don't we bring up the slides right now? Can you do that? Because I have already. There we go. Awesome. That's how it should look. Because I got this. This is sexy. You ready for this? This is
here we go.
Cool.
Oh, how good!
Isn't that awesome?
Oh, that's
yeah. I ripped this off right from
Cosmos is fantastic.
It is a great show, but yeah. So when I first started teaching this course, it was before Cosmos came back, so that got added in later. So
if any of your old university students are watching, they've got something extra already.
There you go. Absolutely. So do I have? I think I do. Yeah. Oh no, here we go. We're gonna jump right into it, but before we do, I was just gonna mention so much of the ways in which we read the text of Genesis, the text of the Bible, is through this very Western, Eurocentric, Christian, post-Christian lens. So when we read something like Genesis chapter 2 to 3, we think about the fall of man. We think about the entrance of sin into the world. And right away, I want to challenge your thinking, David. I want to challenge everyone's thinking with regards to this story. Just forget everything that you think you know about this story, because I'm going to introduce some stuff to you today that is going to be new, I think, for a lot of people. Just to give you an idea where this comes from, Paul wrote in the epistle to the Romans in chapter 5, verses 12 to 14, or verses 12 and 14, just as through one man sin came into the world, so also through sin death, and so death has passed onto all because everyone has sinned. Death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over those whose sins were not the same transgression of Adam. So Paul has clearly shifted the focus of this story onto this idea of sin, of Adam's sin, and how that's affected humankind. And when you open up your Bibles, quite often this is how it's presented. When you hear preachers preach about Genesis 2 and 3, this is what they talk about. I've been so ever since you watched Mark Driscoll lose his mind last week about the sword swallower on the pole. You saw that?
No, I didn't. I didn't see that.
You're kidding, aren't you?
No,
you haven't
I'm
seen that yet.
No.
Oh my god! Oh, you've got to go look this up. But anyways, this whole thing happened at this ridiculous men's conference that they do at James River Church in Missouri. But I just brought that up because watching that, it got me nostalgic. I've been binging a whole bunch of old Mark Driscoll content, which is something that I do.
Why isn't Mark Driscoll like the guy from? Is he from Bethel?
No, he is from He was one of the founders of Mars Hill Church in Seattle. But this is, I just watched, I just listened to an old sermon of his recently where he presented creation and Genesis chapter 2 and 3 in these same terms, right? This is a story about sin. This is a story about marriage. This is a story about a perfect world that became infected by human transgression, and this is wrongheaded. So this people should know too, if you're doing this in order. This lecture on Genesis 2 and 3 follows on my full lecture on Genesis chapter 1. So some of the stuff there is kind of assumed in this lecture, but one of the clear points I want to get across right away is that within the Bible, there is not just one story of creation. There are several. There's at least two stories of creation, and then there's several echoes. There are other texts in the Bible of other stories of creation. You can see this in places like Psalm 74 or Proverbs 8 or Isaiah 14. Like, these all contain echoes of other creation stories. So as we're reading Genesis 2 and 3, I want you to think about this as an independent story of creation. And like any good story, you have to sort out what's going on, what it's about. And because this is a creation myth, I'm going to ask you, David, and the viewers, to set your sights on a couple of important questions. We're going to start by reading the story, and we're going to read it from my favorite version of the Bible,
the brick Bible. Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah,
it's been
absolutely.
a long time since I've been out of the game in regards to young Earth creationist memes for a while now.
Okay.
Like, I'll sometimes watch Paulogia just because like the content's amazing, but man, it's just so tiring to watch young Earth creation stuff these days. But so explain to me, if there are two creation stories, like explicitly two creation stories in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 to 3, I think it is, how do they rectify them? Like, what's the apologist answer to that problem?
The apologetic for connecting the two stories. So the idea is that Genesis 1 provides like a big picture of cosmic creation, And then Genesis 2 and 3 is like a narrow focus on just day 6 and the creation of Adam and Eve, the human beings and everything that happened. So that's just very generally the kind of apologetic we'll get.
But do they line up? Like, do the days line up from the first? Like, do they line? No, they don't line up.
No, there's several problems, right? And these are some of the questions that we need to keep in mind. In the first place, like when you look at just this second creation story without presuming the first story, you're going to see differences, right? First of all, you're going to notice that God behaves differently in this story than he does in the first story. And right away, that's one of the questions, right? What sort of God is this who's creating in Genesis 2 and 3? And how does that contrast with the God of Genesis 1? He's got a different name. There's different aspects of his character and his work in terms of creation from Genesis 1. And then really importantly, what sort of world is he creating? Because as I mentioned, a young earth creationist, or someone who assumes that the Bible is univocal, will want to focus in on this story as an expansion of what's happening in Genesis chapter 1. So they will make assumptions about things that aren't there in the text, right? But importantly, as much as what's already in the story, we also need to pay attention to what's not there as a means to understand exactly what's going on and why. Does that make good sense?
That makes sense. Yeah.
I did notice, I just wanted to cover this. Somebody in the chat did ask the question about which of the two stories is older. I think most scholars are almost are in wide agreement about this, that this story is older than Genesis chapter 1. And in many respects, Genesis chapter 1 is trying to recontextualize what's what this story in a different sort of framework, and is actually providing an apologetic based on problems that they perceive from this story too, right? And I will maybe point out a couple of those as we go.
Don't make me get a mixologist again, because I will. No, but why would Moses write two versions of the same? Sorry, I'm enough of the jokes.
Like seriously, I don't know. I don't know what he was thinking.
I am doing the alcohol's already affected me, which I don't even know if is possible at 18 minutes in, and I've only had anyway. Something's affecting me, but what I've discovered is I'm doing a video on apologetics, and what I've discovered is a lot of the Bible is just apologetics for other parts of the Bible. Does that make
yes.
It'll say one thing and then it'll recontextualize it.
We need to fix that
it again. Yeah, and anyway.
So should we maybe bring the screen up and just go through the story? And when I teach this course, this is kind of how I do it. Right away, we're going to read the story, and the Brick Bible's version is great because it's visual, and because Brandon Powell Smith, or Elba Sperling, as they refer to themselves now, the author, the creator of this masterpiece, has paid very close attention to what's going on in the text in an effort to recreate these environments. So let's just go ahead and read this. On the day Yahweh God made the earth and the heavens, no plant or shrub had yet sprung up, because Yahweh God had not caused it to rain, and there was no man to work the ground. And Yahweh God formed man, the Adam, from the dirt of the ground. And he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. It literally says he breathed into his nose. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Right.
And the man became a living being. So I'm going to pause here because something that is missing from this version of the story in Brendan Powell Smith's telling is a section of geography that I just want to draw some attention to. So I'm going to read verses 12 through 14 of Genesis 2 after Yahweh God has planted the garden in Eden. And it says here, with the tree of life in the middle of the garden and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then the narrative takes a little break there to discuss sort of the wider geography. And I think it's useful to spend a little bit of time looking at this. Here's what the text says. A river flows out from Eden, giving drink to the garden. And from there it diverges and becomes 4 headwaters. The name of the first is Pishon. It encircles the entire land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. There is also Bedolah, or amber, which is a type of precious metal or a stone, and the stone of Soham, or red stone. The name of the second river is Gihon. It encircles the entire land of Cush. The name of the third river is Tigris. It goes eastward from Ashur. The name of the fourth is Euphrates. So, and I'm just going to switch here, and I'm going to read from the chapter that I've written on this to point something out. So, while one of the things that we note in distinguishing this story from Genesis chapter 1 is that there's not such a strong focus on what I call cosmic geography and the shape and the appearance, the broad shape and appearance of this place. There is a small exception here. The world is both nourished by water and surrounded by it. The waters and earth are similarly distinguished, but in this world there is no sea. You'll notice it's only rivers, right? Just rivers and land. The picture here is of a great river originating in this place, in Eden, and flowing through the garden by plants, and from there branching into 4 tributaries, all of which are named. Significantly, all 4 of the rivers are also geographically identified with locations. And there's been much energy expended and much written about the specific locations of these places. And we know clearly of 2 of them. And you've probably heard of these 2 rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. Mm-hmm. The Tigris is a massive and important river flowing southeast from modern Turkey, and then into the Euphrates River before emptying into the Persian Gulf. It was an important river in the mythology and religion for both the Hittites and the Sumerians. The river is said to flow east from Ashur, which was the ancient capital of Assyria. It remained a consequential sacred center for the Neo-Assyrian emperors in the Mid-Iron Age. So these were the people who were ruling in Assyria, like during the 8th, 7th centuries BCE, right at the time of the early stages of the kingdoms of Judah and Israel. So the story does not locate the Euphrates River, but this river was widely known throughout the ancient world, and the name of it was always interchangeable with the city and the region of I almost said Babylon, Babylon, which was the splendid capital of the great empire of the same name, perched on the shores of the river. But the other 2 rivers are unknown. Some commenters suggest that their names are more descriptive than locative. And what I mean by that is they describe what rivers were doing. For instance, Pishon is from a verb meaning to leap, and Gihon is literally the springer out. So it's kind of describing the activity of the water. There are various ideas about the identification of these 2 rivers, and in no small part because of their description surrounding entire regions. You'll notice that when I read it, it said that these rivers literally just encircle the entire land of Cush, or the entire land of Havilah, where there's gold, right? And and this is something that rivers don't do. So what's going on here? The land of Cush is commonly identified with Ethiopia, or Nubia, which is in like ancient geographical terms. Egypt is basically the Nile Delta and south, and Nubia is just further south from that along the Nile River, and that's kind of what's considered the land of Cush. And this could be in view here as a description of the division between of all the great empires at creation. So in this reading, Cush could be just East Africa. However, some have suggested that this could otherwise be with reference to a group of people known as the Kassites, who were living in the Zagros Mountains in modern Iran, and they ruled the city of Babylon for about 400 years, from the 16th to the 12th centuries BCE. But the important point here is to note that we don't know where these rivers are or what they're doing. But I tend to think that this is descriptive of the entire world as it was understood by the readers of this story, that it was a world that was basically defined by these great rivers.
Well, this is super interesting, because to me, this is a very telling problem that I find with the Bible, if taken as the literal perfect word of God. Like it's like, if taken as true. And I shared this with you yesterday. There's a little side project we've been working on that may or may not come out, but it's a book on deconstruction. And these are just my notes. But this is an image I put together based on images that I saw online. But does the biblical God play favorites? Does he bestow special privilege upon particular groups, regions, or era? According to the narratives of the Bible, it might seem so. Each divine intervention, every exile, the conquering of each city, every miraculous recovery, each resurrection from the afterlife, every brutal prosecution, and every sudden conversion all took place within a distinct inked circle on the world map. So like this, I mean, maybe is the world map that you're describing, would it be bigger than this little circle here?
No.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit. It would probably stretch as far east as the Persian Gulf there. Which so is just where Mesopotamia is, right? So, yeah. But it's not very big. No. And I bring that picture back up for a second, and I'll point something else out to you where I think this can make some practical sense. If you just zoom in there on the dot.
Hang on a
that
second.
You were zooming in before.
I don't know where I. Oh. All right. Give us 2 seconds.
Okay. Sorry.
let me just share it again. Welcome to Tech Break Tuesdays. With Tech Breaks.
Well,
it's Thursdays anyway.
At least no one's complaining about your mic. So if you look at where the dot is, and then like just to the south of that dot is the Red Sea, and as I mentioned, the entire Arabian Peninsula is surrounded by water. There's the Persian Gulf on the other side of the Arabian Peninsula, into which like the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers empty. If you look at it this way, and if you think about the extent of this world as people understand it, you could get the sense of how they thought they were surrounded by rivers, right?
Yeah.
They knew that, for the Red Sea, for example, they knew was bounded on 2 sides by land, by the Arabian Peninsula on the one side and by Egypt on the other side. So in their imagination, maybe this was just a gigantic river. Yeah. Similar with the Persian Gulf is the emptying point of these other 2 great rivers. So I just make this point to kind of say, it's not as silly as you think it is. If you're limited in these sorts of ways through the geography, and also through our ideas of what a river is compared to an ocean or a lake or a sea, right? These ideas could be more fluid in this ancient mindset. But let's bring the slide back up, and we'll continue in the story here. So Yahweh God planted the garden.
This is like Sunday school. Yay!
Right? It's great. And he planted these 2 trees in the middle of the garden. Then Yahweh God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to look after and to maintain it. Yahweh God commanded the man, from every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but from the tree of knowledge of good and evil you may not eat. For the day that you eat from it, you will surely die. Then Yahweh God said, it's not good for the man to be alone. I will make him a helper, his counterpart. From the dirt, Yahweh God formed every animal of the field and every bird of the sky. He brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called them, that was its name. Oh, I'll call you Murdoch. But no suitable help was found for the man. I think that's what it says underneath the... I think so. Yeah. Then Yahweh God caused a deep sleep to fall on the man, and while he slept, he took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh in its place. From the rib Yahweh God had taken from the man, he made a woman.
There's so many things that I want to interject with, but it's going to take us on a whole other path of like...
It probably won't. Probably will. And I expect we'll cover some of this as we go through it. He brought her to the man, and the man said, this is at last bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. She will be called woman because she was taken out of man. This is why a man leaves his father and mother and clings to his wife, and they become one flesh. I guess we should have put like a PG-13 warning on this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to get demonetized now. Is there a possibility? I always thought this, that the two will become one flesh. I've always wondered, was that just like their version of sex education? Like, hey, just so you know, when you have sex, like you kind of go into each other and you become... It's
an expression. It's certainly an expression of that. And we will talk a little bit about what's going on there and what ancient people thought about the relationship of this to creation. It's really important. So I think I got one more.
Let me just take this opportunity to ask if my wife is watching, would you like to become one flesh later? Anyway, back to the story.
back to creation.
Yeah.
And the man and his wife were both naked, and they were not ashamed. Look how confident they look. It's great. Yeah. So now we've read through a version of this story, a very visual version of this story, and I'm going to raise these questions again. What is different about God as he appears in this story, and what you can recollect from Genesis 1? What about his name or his designation? What's different in the depiction of his being or his character, or even the ways in which he creates? I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that? Just at the outset?
No, not at all, actually.
Okay.
Because it's been a while since I've looked into...
Read Genesis 1?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and unfortunately, you haven't got that far in the course yet either. So,
but I love that. That's actually true. Like, there's so much.
Yeah.
If you want to learn, if you want to get the background knowledge, my God, there is a lot of. I felt like I learned so much, and I'm like, again, I've had my wisdom teeth taken out. I'm hopped up on drugs.
Yes.
I'm like watching it in bed, like falling asleep, waking up, playing it again. So, anyway.
Oh dear. Okay. Well, first of all, I'll help you out here. Okay. Right at the outset, one of the things that we see that's quite different. Just bring the slides back up here again. Yep. Yeah. So what's different about God? His name and his designation, his depiction, the method of creation. what's different about this environment compared to Genesis chapter 1. We'll talk about all of these things, right? But about the pre-creative form, what did the world look like before God started creating in this story compared to Genesis 1? These all give us important clues about how these stories are different and how they're answering different questions. So there's a different order of creation in this story compared to Genesis 1. Most importantly, one of the things that that everyone who's a little bit familiar with that story compared to this one should pick up on is the very first thing God creates in this story, man. What's the first thing he creates in Genesis chapter 1?
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters.
Notice also there's, this is a Genesis 1 is a world of water in the beginning,
said,
right? Starts.
Yeah.
And then the first thing God creates there is
let
what?
there be light.
There you go.
Light, and there was light.
And then there's, he divides the light from the darkness. He divides the land from the water. Then he plants trees and plants. Then he makes fish, and then he makes animals, and he finally makes man. Oh, he puts the stars in the sky up there too. So he does all of these things before he gets around to creating the man. But here in Genesis 2 and 3, this is the first thing he does, is creates the man. And then he makes animals. Or sorry, he makes the trees first and the plants, and then he makes animals. So there's already a different order of things that's going on here. And I think that's significant to what this story is about. But ultimately, when we think about these ancient stories, we're really trying to set our focus on the purpose. The ways in which things are being described and in terms of their creation is all geared toward this idea that everything has its own designated purpose. So our task here is to ask, what is the purpose of these things that God is making in this story? What is the purpose of the trees and the garden and the animals and the man? Why did he make all of this stuff? So first off, right. Let's look at my notes here. Right away, I'm going to point out the one of the key differences between this and the first story is in this story, God is consistently called Yahweh, whereas in the Genesis 1 story, he's called Elohim. And this was originally one of the early ways, the first ways that early readers of this story started to key in on the idea that these were different stories. But this God is he doesn't have just a different name. He's different in terms of how he creates. In verse 7, when it describes Yahweh creating the first human, it says that Yahweh God literally shaped the man. And you remember the picture, right? He's sitting there in the dirt with the man shaping him out of the dirt of the ground. And then he breathed into his nose a life breath, and he became a living being. So the image presented here is of a potter. And it's the same verb used for potting, basically, like shaping clay on a potter's wheel. So this is what this God is. He's an artisan working with the materials of the earth to build things. And this is different from Genesis 1, where God basically creates by uttering words and dictating things into existence by fiat. The God here, I would suggest, is different. He's getting his hands dirty. He's shaping, he's forming the man, as I said, as an artisan, potting clay with his hands into a usable vessel. This is what pottery was. Pottery was the formation of usable vessels for various tasks. This God is more present and not so distantly removed from the world as the cosmic dictator in Genesis 1. So, reading further in the story, what's different about the world? What's different about its early form? And the order of creation. I think we saw those already on the side. I mentioned there's a contrast to the watery world in Genesis 1. It was all these chaotic, frothing waters. Here in Genesis 2, unlike the cold, dark, deep waters of chaos that cover the earth, this is a world of barren dirt. It's land. It's land and rivers. It says that there was a mist that hovered over the earth because God hadn't sent rain yet that watered the earth. But it's basically a barren wasteland. And in response to this condition, the first thing that God does is he plants a garden. Now, we often have this tendency to think about the garden as like this paradise, this natural paradise out in the woods, right? Like, and there's
this of Homer eating the pig who's like, oh, try some of this, and
yeah,
that's what I remember
exactly, right? And we tend to think of the garden too as something that God created for man, a place for him to live. But you'll notice as we work through this story a little bit more carefully that the man is not so much like the garden is not so much created for the man as the man is created for the garden. Because in this story, as throughout the Hebrew Bible where this garden is mentioned, it's actually called here it's called the garden that is in Eden. Sometimes it's called Garden of Eden, but in several in the handful of other places in the Hebrew Bible where this particular garden is mentioned, it's called the Garden of God. It's God's garden. It's for him.
Right. And okay. So someone mentioned something really interesting too. They said Terj said pottery, the technology of the era. And it's like very interesting. Is that true? That's like pottery was the hip thing at the time. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting because like I wonder if this was happening now, would God be using like cryptocurrency and like I don't know, whatever.
God, I hope not.
like Adam is an NFT or something like.
Yeah. We're all non-fungible.
But yeah, it's interesting because
maybe something similar to that though.
It paints this idea that's very, because it changes the dynamic. What you're saying is it's not about us. We're like God's playthings for his, and that kind of lines up more with scripture. It seems like God created us, and then he was mad with us, like, you know what I mean? And then he was happy. Like, yeah, it seems to line up that like we're a pet is what the text is kind of saying, like a pet for God.
Yeah,
which I don't think is a controversial opinion.
Not, I wouldn't say like pet, and this is one of the things that you see is a regular theme throughout a variety of creation stories in the ancient Near East, is that human beings were created to serve, or basically be slaves working for the benefit of the gods. And I would suggest that that's reflected in this story here too. I'm just going to look at what I have next here. Some of this is a bit out of order. So yeah, so we'll get to that in a few minutes. But I just want to leave with that for now, and then we'll pick it up in a few minutes. The creation of man it says, it literally, like the story says, God made the man out of the dirt. Then it says he planted this garden, and then it says he took the man and set him in the garden to till and to tend it, to work and to keep it, are the words. And we'll get into this a little bit. Another way to translate these words are to slave after and to guard it. So right off, the man's purpose is to work the garden, to look after the garden that Yahweh God has planted here. So man has been built to work.
Is this the Genesis 3 version or the Genesis?
This is Genesis 2. This is Genesis 2. And this is different from Genesis 1, where humankind is created as a reflection of God's power and dominion. Okay. So they're like when I teach Genesis 1, I talk about humankind as like a victory monument of God, expressing his power and his dominance over the earth, right? So they're almost kind of like a strong arm of God, whereas here it's all about working for God and looking after his garden.
Someone mentioned earlier that these two stories came from different sources. Can you quickly explain the sources around? I mean, the traditional perspective is that Moses wrote the Pentateuch, but it also talks about his funeral and aftermath a little bit.
So kind of hard to do that. Very briefly, there are the Pentateuch was not written all by Moses. It was formed out of at least a couple of at least a few independent sources, and scholars have disagreements about what the sources were and a little bit about where they came from. Most popularly, it's known. The most popular source theory is the documentary hypothesis, which posits that there were 4 sources that scholars called J, E, D, and P: the Yahwist, the Elohist, the Deuteronomic source, and the priestly source. It's become quite a bit more nuanced then, and the existence of all of these is a matter of some dispute. I would say that most scholars would agree that there's definitely a priestly source or a P source, and that a bunch of stuff that's non-P, but is also maybe not all from the same source. And that's what we're dealing with here. Is the Genesis 1 story is the priestly account of creation. Now in Genesis 2 and 3, we have a different story that was written earlier than that. And this is more likely the Yahwist account or the non-P account. And it probably, this story probably stemmed from within the land of Judah, like within the land of Israel, whereas the Genesis 1 story might have been written from outside, in Babylon or in the Persian Empire or something to that effect. So all people need to know is that there are, scholars are generally agreed that there's a lot of sources behind the construction of the Pentateuch as we have it today, and most of the work in the Pentateuch is focused on this, on identifying the sources and their origins and their composition and where they came from, and how they got pulled together. So
okay,
yeah, right. So let's talk a little bit about something else that's critical to this story. You'll notice right away, God creates the man, and then he puts him in the garden, and then the first thing he says is that this isn't good. The man needs help, is literally what the text says. No suitable partner was found for the man. So his response to that is to create animals. He brings them to the man. The man names the animals, and in that naming process, it's discovered. And the man and God seem to make this discovery together that this isn't going to work for whatever reason. We're not told exactly what the problem is, but you can sort of read between the lines here, because the response then is for God to create a woman out of the man. And then, you have this rather touching description of these two coming back together in a sexual union. So by implication, there's something within this story that is also about sex. And one of the things that's being communicated in this story is that you shouldn't have sex with animals. I mean, it's basically that simple at the heart of it. We're not going to dwell on that for now, though. But this is something that people need to bear in mind as we read through the story, just how closely some of these ideas and the language and the way it's presented is tied to human sexuality, and to the part that plays in creation and in making discernments between divine, between the mortal and the immortal, and between knowledge and ignorance. All of this stuff is tied up together. So we see in verses. I'm just going to look at my my slides here. Okay.
Do you want to bring it up?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's bring this up. So I'm going to introduce a word at this point. Genesis chapter 2 and 3 are what we call an etiology. Do you know this word, David?
No, I was being silly.
Oh, were you? Okay. So
I'm not a smart man. I know what love is.
I was going to say it. So an etiology is a story that's told to explain mysterious elements of who we are, where we came from, what's our purpose, why do we do the things that we do. There's a one biblical scholar, the way that he says it, I quite like it. His name is Don Benjamin, and he says the Hebrews lacked both the data for and the interest in forging a chain between themselves and early humans. Instead, they told creation stories, put human life in their time into perspective. Their creation stories are not reports about the past. They are timeless reflections on human life. So they're not necessarily, even though they're doing their best to reach into the distant past to figure out where this stuff started. But this is all about explaining why we do the things we do now, why we behave the way we do now. In these, why do we find ourselves in the circumstances that we do? So there was yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask a quick question. How likely do you think it was that the early Israelites, the people writing this stuff, cared that much about truth? Do you think, because you look at I guess the conversation around creationism and evolution, and people get really defensive and heated about what is factually true. Do you think people in ancient times cared as much about how factual any of these stories were, or were they more of a traditional story that you kind of, I don't know, the facts are beyond the point, or is that something we can't know?
I mean, we've had so much of the ways in which we just process reality have been shaped by intellectual, social forces of, from the medieval period, and the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution, and all these things have contributed so much to just the ways in which we think and the ways in which we process these questions that it's almost not even a fair question to ask. I would say ancient people cared very deeply about truth and they were certain that they understood, and they desperately wanted to understand the way things worked and how the world was, and what was right and wrong and what was true and false. But there were different paths to discovering that, and it was processed and understood in different terms. It was less important to. It was most important to understand everything had meaning, is maybe a better way to think about this. These weren't they I don't think they had such a strong sense of brute facts in the same way that we do. They had a sense of everything as being interconnected and part of a grand explanation. So the goal was always to discover the meaning of things. So it wasn't as important to fixate on, say, the number of days in creation. There were 6 days in creation. Therefore, and these were 24-hour days, and there was a sunrise and a sunset over each day. And let's reconstruct in our minds what that looked like. So much as, why were there 6 days? And what do those 6 days mean? And how does that translate into the ways that we do things now and our, interactions with the divine now? So it had much more to do with discovering meaning and purpose than what I would call like brute facts.
There's an old idea that if a lion could speak English, we wouldn't be able to understand it, right? Have you heard that saying before?
I haven't.
It's like it's like the idea is like if a lion could speak English, you couldn't understand it because your worldviews are so far apart that you wouldn't have nothing to grab onto to make references to things and to explain things. It's an interesting thought experiment, but I wonder how much if you could bring an early Israelite folk into the 21st century or to now, and they could speak English, I wonder how much we could actually effectively communicate beyond a surface level. I wonder if our worldview and the things that we reference and understand are so foreign to them that it's become a really hard thing to even just have a conversation.
Yeah. Even in terms of ways in which, the liver for an ancient Israel is akin to your gut. So they have this way of processing information that actually goes through, their organs, their internal organs, in a sense that we don't, right? But I think you're probably onto something with that. It's one of the things, and maybe you did pick up on this in the very first lecture in the course. One of the things I lay out right at the beginning is that it's a weird world. The Bible's weird. Like when you look at it as a modern person, and you understand it and you're reading it carefully, it shouldn't make sense. It really shouldn't, because our worlds are just so different from one another. And that's why it takes so much work to get to what's going on in the text. And that's where it gets fun. Because once you dig into what's going on in the mindset of these people as they're practicing their religions and they're writing their texts, then you start to understand what that looks like for them, and to transpose what that means for us, then that's when it becomes super fun, right?
Sorry to ask one last another question, but is it true that they thought of the Earth as flat, or at least didn't think of it as a sphere? Okay, so that's
that's pretty well established. There's I would say
a response from Inspiring Philosophy. No, we're gonna get one of these shorts.
Probably.
Hope so. Please, come on.
There's no
dunk on me, man.
So there's no
Dunk on
good
me.
reason. There's no text. There's no good reason to expect that they didn't. Right? It's but by the same token, it's not explicit either, because it's one of these things that was just so widely assumed. Why would you think the world was round? Like it's not intuitive, which is something that the flat earthers keep pounding away at, right? Like it's just not. It's not what I see when I look out onto the world. It looks flat. It behaves in the way that seems like it's flat, right? So why would they think it was anything other than that? So yeah. You ready to move on here? So ideologies were first promoted by this dapper looking gentleman within biblical studies. This is Hermann Gunkel. And he used this idea of etiologies as a way of reading, of thinking that many biblical traditions were formed, transmitted in Israelite societies as explanations of how things came to be the way they are. He developed this idea. It's a German term that is still prominent within biblical studies, Sitz im Leben, or setting in life. And this idea states that the stories in the book of Genesis were collected from small individual tales that shed light on their setting in life for the first readers. Tied to this idea of the original setting, Gunkel pointed out that these stories were not literature, having been produced as written documents, but at first were stories told in an oral culture, passed down for generations and centuries. So they weren't told for their literary and historical purposes in the ways that we understand history, at least. They were told to explain the present, to explain how things came to be the way they are. And the term, the modern term that scholars have applied to this way of thinking that Gunkel developed is form criticism. Form criticism is exploring various forms of biblical literature in an effort to understand what they mean. So when approaching a story like this second creation myth, this story in Genesis chapter 2, it's worthwhile exploring these questions of meaning, and also for whom and why it was meaningful. So as I'm going to continue, I'm going to talk about the creation of the garden as and the creation of man as a reflection on human enterprise, a type of anthropology. And I'm going to talk about the man in three terms. The man, or the Adam, in this story is a farmer. He is a pastoralist or a herdsman, and he's a lover or a sexual being. And these are at the heart of what's going on in Genesis chapter 2. So we're going to start with Adam, the farmer. And we begin in Genesis 2, verse 6, with the formation of the first man. We call him Adam as a name, but it's not a personal name. At least it's not a personal name yet. It's a description of where he came from, and the way that he's designated within the text is not as Adam, but Ha-Adam, or the Adam. So it's got the definite article there at the front. So, as I said, it's not a main name. It eventually comes to mean humankind or refer to humankind, but we're not there yet. It's used in this first creation. It's used in the first creation myth in Genesis 1 to describe the creation of man, also with the definite article. It says God created the man, or the Adam, in his image. But this is not an ordinary man, as we shall come to discover. He is the primitive man, the first who embodied all humankind. I think from the perspective of this writer, he contains within him every race, every gender, every culture, every possibility, all in one being. Because of his distinction, I usually choose to translate the word neither as the name Adam, nor as the general man, but rather as the Adam, the first human before any man. He's not really like you or like me. He's quite different. So, first of all, let's move on to this. First of all, the Adam takes his name from the dirt. The word for dirt in this story in Genesis 2 is Adamah, and you can hear it in there, right? Adam is derived directly from this word for Adamah, and it makes sense because that's how he was formed. He was shaped out of clay or the dirt from the ground by Yahweh's hands. So the significance of this is tied directly to his envisioned purpose and function, the envisioned purpose and function of mankind. And but we must see this as quite distinct from how humans are imagined in Genesis 1. They're pictured there more like physical manifestations of God. They're created literally in the image of God. But here, they're dirt. They were created from the dirt, and they're made for the dirt. So
this actually, sorry, I'll let you go.
No, okay. Yeah. So, unlike in the first story, the first creation story depicts the pre-created world as this hostile, watery world of frothing chaos. It's just covered in these dark, cold waters, and this is very different. It's not. This world is one of unusable farmland. It's wilderness. It says in verse 5 there in Genesis 2:5, before every shrub of the field was on the earth, before every grain of field would sprout, because Yahweh God had not sent rain upon the ground. And importantly, there was no man to work the soil. Now, I want you to catch this because the point is quite subtle. Both the stories in Genesis 1 and 2 presuppose the station of human beings. In both, they're tasked with the supervision over the rest of the natural world. In Genesis 1, man says, God says you have dominion and rulership. Your task is to subdue the rest of the natural world that I've just put into order. But here, the function of the way this takes place is quite different. In Genesis 1, humankind is set to rule and subdue nature, as I said. But here, the Adam's work is not dominion, but it's service, or you could even say it's slavery. Yahweh first forms the man, the Adam, in verse 7. Then he plants the garden, and he put the Adam whom he had shaped there. So the purpose of the creation of the man, of the Adam, is to cultivate the garden that God has planted. And as I said, this is God's garden. He's planted it for himself. In verse 15, the Adam's purpose is made explicit. He has been taken by Yahweh and settled in the garden. To work and to watch is a good translation of the Hebrew there. The JPS says to till and to tend, which I quite like. And the picture is of a man farming the land, right? But there's an added significance to the usage of these two words together, to till and to tend, or to work and to watch or to slave and to keep, as I have here on the screen. And these words together carry with them like these religious cultic connotations. Both words are used often if of the Israelite priestly group known as the Levites to describe their service to Yahweh, specifically in the tent sanctuary known as the tabernacle or in the Jerusalem temple. In Numbers 3, verse 7 to 8, for example, do I have this on the screen? No, not yet. My slides are ahead. I'm sorry. But in Numbers 3, 7 to 8, it says this. Now listen to this, David. They shall perform their duties, and this is the same word, or literally keep the watch. They shall keep the watch for him and the charge of the whole congregation before the tent of meeting, doing the work or performing the service or slaving for the Mishkan or the tabernacle. They shall keep, that's the same word again, or take charge or guard all the furnishings of the tent of meeting and charge the people of Israel to do the work of the tabernacle. It's the same words that are being used there as being used here. So this really there's a couple of things going on here. The man is created to look after this garden that God has planted, but the garden itself seems to be an expression of a sacred space. It's reflective of the tabernacle or the temple. These ideas are all being imported into this story. So, but let's talk a little bit about what this place is, the garden in Eden. So I've mentioned this before, it's been romanticized into this unspoiled wilderness and used for commentary on, man's purpose to commune with nature. I think we tend to gravitate to this sort of reading in our strongly urbanized culture where people sequester themselves in cities and work where work and convenience are most readily found. And with this, for many, comes a longing for the outdoors, getting out of the city, getting back to nature. We have this idea of the untouched, untrammeled world, that hasn't been infected by human enterprise. So, and we tend to think that that's what's going on in this story. But this isn't God's garden. The Hebrew writer of this story doesn't see an untampered natural vista. It's an attractive idea, and as much as our own modern environmental concerns might prefer this reading, the Garden of God was actually like a sculpted landscape garden. It was an urban masterpiece. It's rather set in sharp contrast to the undeveloped, uninhabited wilderness, right? When the story starts, that's all there is just like this wasteland. And what God does is he makes the man and then he plants this urban garden. This is all about forming civilization.
Whoa. That is wild.
Right?
This actually says a lot about God as well. This whole story. Like, I had people arguing with me on Twitter. And again, I shouldn't be arguing with people on Twitter, but I can't help myself sometimes. And people were saying that God is not physical, or God doesn't have a physical. And I'm like, what are you talking? Like, God is, first of all, why does God need to make humans out of clay? That seems weird. And like, he's using his hands. He's walking with them in the garden.
Yes.
It seems when you look at
breathing into them
with his lungs, when you look at he's resting on the seventh day. What kind of an all-powerful God?
That's a different story, but yeah.
I mean, but like, even you look at it, it seems very, it seems to me when I read the Bible, it seems much more like God was made in our image than we were made in God's image. Like, God gets angry, he loves, he cares, he cries, he weeps, he is like happy, he's like, he feels all the emotions that you wouldn't expect an all-powerful, an all-knowing being. He gets confused, he makes mistakes, he does, it's very clearly to me, God was made in our image and not the other way around.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. And this is something that I think people, and that's why I spend so much time on background information at the beginning of the course, because we have to unravel, we have to undo all these things that we've just come to assume about God and about religion, and about the Bible. Excuse me, from like years and years of shaping and growing up in this Western world, this Western culture that's been so shaped by these sorts of ideas. In antiquity, in the ancient Near East, gods were not unlimited. They were not omniscient. They were not omnipresent. They were big, and they were strong, and were smart. And they were extremely powerful and frightening, but they were just like people. The way I put it is they're like people in every respect, only more and bigger. I think at one point in the book, I make the statement that big gods have big feelings, and that's something, because lots of times when you read stories, and I think this is part of what's being communicated. Lots of times when you read stories in the Bible where the feelings of God are being expressed, or when you read some of the other ancient Near Eastern literature which speak of gods acting on their feelings, it seems extreme.
Yeah.
But I think this is part of it, right? They're just so much more than humans. Then like their reactions are extreme, just like everything else about them.
Yeah. So, just a reminder, if anyone's enjoying this course, I've seen a few people comment that they're really enjoying this lecture. This is just like one part, like a relaxed version of one part of the whole series, which is available. Like obviously links in the description. If anyone does sign up during this this episode, just let us know, and we'll count that as a super chat, and you can ask a question to Kip in the comments, because it's totally helping out the channel, helping out Kip and MVP courses. But yeah, it's just be warned though. Just be warned, it's dense. Like you're gonna have to watch. I'm gonna have to watch it a couple of times, because like it's dense. It's got a lot of information there, which is really good. It's what you want from a course.
I think so. So yeah, and we're never gonna get through this lecture tonight. I'm aware of that now. We'll go for as long as we can.
Okay.
So this garden, as I said, is an urban masterpiece. So now this makes sense, because the people who told these stories and who wrote these stories, the ways in which historians and sociologists and anthropologists and archaeologists have sort of reconstructed the history and the formation of the early Israelites. There's this I'm going to come back to there's this running theme throughout the early parts of Genesis, and it's here in this story too, of a movement away from the city and into the wilderness. And this is reflective of a bit of an historical reality. So, this contrast between the garden, the urban garden, and the untamed wilderness outside is makes sense from within the physical geography of the people who lived in Israel, like the cultivated, lush valleys of the Jordan River, or the Shephelah, which is where most of the Philistine cities were, and the grazing paths in the north, and the southern highlands were dotted. Sorry,
hang on a sec, Kip. It's clipping a little bit for you. People are saying, I'm just gonna bring you out and then bring you, and then hopefully that fixes it.
Am I back?
Yeah, sounds better.
Can you hear me?
Better.
Do I sound okay? Yeah. So
the StreamYard thing.
Okay. So there were these places that were lush and valuable as places for grazing and throwing food and stuff. And they were, of course, dotted by these Canaanite cities, these monuments of human achievement. And this then gets set in sharp relief against, the rocky highlands above them and the trackless wilderness beyond the Transjordan to the east. And if you watch the second lecture, which is all about the geography of this place, you'll have a stronger sense of what I'm talking about here. So now, but moreover, the text was also influenced by encounters with the powerful Neo-Babylonian Empire later in the 6th century BCE. In particular, our imagination settle on the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Look, I have a picture. There's a photograph of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. I'm just kidding. This is a painting, but this is a painting by a Dutch master from the 1700s.
How accurate is this painting? Is this
we don't know. We honestly have a very limited idea of what the Hanging Gardens of Babylon looked like, except that they were, set a lot terraced. I think it was either 7 or 10 terraces, and it was set along the Euphrates River. I particularly like the Tower of Babel in the background.
Yeah, I was going to say the Tower of Babel.
It's pretty good, eh? So, but the Hanging Gardens of Babylon were constructed by Nebuchadnezzar II, ruled between 605 and 562 BCE. And this step masterpiece is said to be one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Nebuchadnezzar built this garden as as a gift for his queen, Amytas, who was a Persian princess, and he built it for her to help ease her homesickness for the mountains and the forests of Iran, where she came from. So she's now moved from beautiful, mountainous, forested Iran, and she's living in Babylon, which is it's like this very flat, marshy, kind of swampy place. So it's no wonder she was homesick, and he must have liked her a bit to build this beautiful, lush garden for her. But the point is that this is more what's in the mind of the Hebrew writer of this story, is something like this. This is the Garden of God. It's mentioned elsewhere in the Bible. As I said, in Ezekiel 31 verses 8 to 9, a text that we date also to the 6th century, there's a parable there of the nations, and they're pictured as trees in God's garden. And the greatest of the trees is the kingdom of Egypt, poised for a fall. I'll just read a little bit. This is my translation of Ezekiel 31 verses 8 to 9. No cedars rivaled its height in the garden of God. No fir trees matched its branches, and no plane trees could compare with its beauty. Every tree in the garden of God envied its splendor. I adorned it with abundant foliage. All the trees of Eden envied it, those in the garden of God. So the point here then is that the garden does not represent virgin nature. It's rather a picture of the ingenuity and the social, cultural advances of people. So we're going to one of the themes that I'm going to introduce to this story is the ways in which the story of Adam and Eve and the serpent are really in conversation with a very popular, very old ancient Near Eastern myth called the Epic of Gilgamesh. And the Epic of Gilgamesh begins and ends in exactly the same way, with Gilgamesh basically surveying his own city, the city of Uruk, and marveling over the wonders of this place that he has built. And in many ways, this story and also the stories that follow it through Genesis 4 through 11 are really being told in response to this urban ideal that appears in the Epic of Gilgamesh. And in as Gilgamesh himself exalted over his own city, Uruk, 1 league city, 1 league palm gardens, 1 league lowlands, the open area of the Ishtar temple, 3 leagues in the open area of Uruk, close it. But in keeping with the prevalent theme that then follows in the Genesis narrative, we need to take a moment and reflect. If the primeval story is one of anti-urbanization, as I'm going to suggest that it is, then how does this affect our appraisal of God's garden, the triumph of urban planning? So the idea here is that I believe that the writer of this story is really invested in this idea that cities are bad, right? That urbanization is actually bad, as much as it's a reflection of human ingenuity and advancement of technology. There's also this sense through a lot of this literature in the early parts of Genesis that we need to get away from that.
Yeah.
So with that in view,
exiled out of the like Adam and Eve were exiled from the garden, right?
and it goes on from there. Cain is the first murderer. He's also the first to build a city. The great cities of then the next great city that's built is in Genesis chapter 10. Nimrod is also an antagonistic character in Genesis, and he builds the great cities of Uruk and Babylon and Nineveh and Ashur, I believe. So he builds all these great cities, and he's bad. And then you have the story of the Tower of Babel, which is all about the building of a great city and its abandonment. And then finally, in Genesis chapter 12, you end up with Abraham. And the first story of Abraham is of God appearing to him and telling him to get out of the city of Ur. And he then spends the rest of his life wandering around in the wilderness, never attaching himself again to a city. It goes on like that. Lot, his nephew, decides he wants to settle in the cities of the plains, Sodom and Gomorrah, and we all know what happens to him. So this idea of getting out of the cities it's really built in to these narratives in certainly in the early parts of the book of Genesis. I think it's intentional.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. You think like is this the meaning behind the literature? Because I heard this.
That's a big part of it. It's a big part of it.
I think it was like episode 7 or something. It was when I first had Dr. Josh on. He explained part of this theory, and it's blown my mind. Like I want to read more about it because it makes so much more sense. Like the whole story of the Garden of Eden, if taken at like the version of Christianity that I used to be a part of, it's like, so God creates this garden, but he knows everything, but he doesn't know that man is going to sin for some reason, and then man does sin, but like but God should have known that, and then like he kicks him out, and then it's like another failure after another failure after another. Like man still keeps, like, if God's all knowing, why does he keep getting surprised by how, I guess, shitty
by stuff, the way that stuff happens? Yeah. And I'm going to challenge you to try and shift your thinking away from ideas of sin in this story, because it's not there. This is an idea that we have incorporated into the story. The word is literally not there.
Hang on a second.
I'll show you. But
what about eating? Okay, let's show me, because eating the fruit, wasn't that like the
it's
first
not
sin?
No, it's not. And it's complicated.
Okay.
It's so I mean we probably won't, and maybe we probably won't get that. Yes, it's good to see you, Jess. But she's absolutely right. It's not there.
Yeah, I've missed just screaming things in the
the,
comments.
the story, what's going on with the eating of the fruit, this has everything to do with this strange place that humans have come to occupy between being gods and being part of the rest of the natural world, being different from the animals. It's a way of explaining why we're so much like the gods but not the gods. So it has everything. It's all about it's all about the way that I title this lecture, the way that I titled the chapter in my book that talks about Genesis 2 is knowledge and death. It's really the story of the eating of the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil is all about knowledge, immortality, and sex. It's all in there. Nakedness is a big part of this.
So
I'm sorry, I'm hurting your brain.
So no, that's fine. Okay. My mind is going in a million different areas. Can I ask you? Can I ask you before I forget? Because it's something that's super. And look, answer this at your own peril. If you don't want to answer this because it's going to take the conversation on a very different angle, then don't answer it. But when someone mentioned very early on, Yahweh says, "The man has become like one of us, or made in our image." What the hell does that mean? Like I kind of know, but I want to hear you explain it. Like, what does it mean by made in our image?
Well, again, you're conflating two different stories here, right? So that's Genesis 1 being made in God's image. Let's forget that for now. So when man becomes like one of us, what Yahweh says, man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. We need to get him out of here now, because if we don't, he's going to reach out and take hold of the tree of life and live forever. So there's something.
But isn't that what?
And that's the other thing. Okay,
isn't that what God
that's
wants
something
us to
else.
get to?
No,
isn't the whole thing with Jesus,
right?
Like we'll live forever with paradise. Sorry.
So no. It's and these are, and this is how this literature changes, right? Like there's a whole Christian layer, interpretive layer that's added to this, where in which the garden the garden then is I'm actually going to suggest to you, and as far as I know, this is me. I don't know if there's other scholars who have really pushed this idea, but I'm going to suggest to you that getting out of the garden for the writer of this story is actually a pretty good thing.
Okay.
It's not all bad. It's not all bad. I'll just say that much at this point. But part of, like, a lot of this is tied up in the idea of the well, as we read through, we'll get to seeing this stuff more clearly. But there's a fixation in this story on these things: nakedness, knowledge, immortality. And these seem to be things that distinguish between what makes a human and what makes a god. So taking and eating from the fruit of the tree of knowledge and good and evil is a step towards becoming a god. So it separates the people, that separates the humans from their original intended creation. It makes them basically unfit to continue to do what they were built to do. Because of this, they can no longer still intend the garden. But then there's a danger here because they're not what they were created to do. They're no longer doing what they were created to do, and now they're also halfway to becoming gods. The next step to becoming gods is to take from the tree of life and to live forever, to have immortality. So that's where God says we have to get them out of the garden, and we have to bar them from coming back in to take hold of the tree of life and live forever. It's not good.
Okay.
Do you want to? We've been going for like an hour and a half. Do you want to do a little bit more here, and then just see?
I forgot to ask before
how
we
far
started.
we go.
How far are we going? This is
well,
your lecture.
I think I told you my wife is out of town, so I'm good to go until I pass out. But
well, do we want to? We can jump into some question and answers, or we can.
Yeah, sure.
Or is there a good spot to like continue on until we get to a
well, spot? Let's do this. Let's go through Adam the herdsman, and we can talk about sex in the animals a little bit. And then maybe we'll stop there. And if this is something you want to, if you want to pick this up at another time, we could come back and then talk about the tree of knowledge.
Everyone, let us know if you've like we've got a lot of viewers, so let us know if you like this kind of content. And of course, the course is there for you to
do we? Did you say we have a lot of viewers? Sorry, I can't see any of this.
We got 65. We have 65.
Oh, nice.
Which is good. Awesome. Especially because I haven't streamed for like, I don't know,
a month.
Yeah, it's like, hey man, there's a lot of stuff going on. But actually, this would be probably a good time to quickly just shout out. Let me just pull up. We have some awesome guests coming up on Deep Drinks. We have Ricky coming up in 7 days talking about trying to make sense of the Trinity, and I have no idea why everyone is so up in arms about the Trinity, and then I've only just recently learned about why they're up in arms about the Trinity and like why it's so important and why Michael Jones says that Mormons aren't true Christians because they don't believe in the Trinity, and it's really interesting. So he's going to do a deep dive on that.
Okay.
Yeah. Then we have
your word for it.
Anya Loven coming on, who is this amazing person. She rescues children accused of witchcraft over in Nigeria. And I interviewed her for the documentary that's in the background I've been working on about the King James Bible and witchcraft. Children as young as 2 years old, 3 years old, if they are sick all the time or they stay up all night or they throw tantrums, a Pentecostal preacher might say that they are a witch, and in which case they'll be thrown into the street, abandoned, tortured sometimes, put through deliverance sessions, which they're given poison to drink, and if they survive, that's the demon. That's like the demon died. Sometimes they're burnt alive. They're thrown in pits and buried alive. There's one pastor that was, if you look up witch children, there's a documentary on YouTube, but there's one pastor's like, I've killed 100 children. Like he's killed 100 witch children, and it all comes from Pentecostal preachers over there. And so she's over there. She's saved like over 93. They got 93 children under their care, and she's coming on to tell their story and tell about how Pentecostal Christianity or Christians in general spreading superstition and stuff. There's a lot of research done in this documentary, but there's a famous preacher over there who wrote a book, and literally one of the things it says in the book is to know if you have a witch child or not is if the child won't sleep through the night and throws tantrums. That's like you might have a witch child. Bring them to a preacher. And then after that, we have History Valley coming on to talk about God's Father. Ooh. So apparently they read the Bible and they're like, wait a minute, this verse kind of makes it look like God has a father. So we're going to learn about that, and that's going to be really interesting. Very cool. Well. And of course, as I've said a bunch of times, go check out the course. The course is amazing. And Dr. Kip, you have a channel as well. Do you want to shout out what you're currently doing on that channel?
Lots of live streams lately because I've been focusing most of my creative energies on getting this book finished. So, but in the meantime, I've been doing a bunch of live streams. I had a fun one yesterday where I reviewed an egregious piece of academic fraud, where I guess I don't know if he's a famous Christian apologist, but he's he's a very visible Christian apologist who basically just self-plagiarized whole MA thesis into his PhD. So I come with the receipts for that. It was fun, and it was my birthday yesterday. So
well, that leads us into one of the super chats from Lady
yeah!
Happy belated birthday, Dr. Kip. Thank you for the $2 super chat. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Lady Wasser. She's one of my patrons.
Yeah, I thought I'd recognized her actually.
No.
Yeah,
so,
okay.
Yeah,
so,
and I have I'm just thinking here in terms of content. Josh and I are going to be back reading Hebrew next week. Josh and I do a bi-weekly Hebrew reading stream every second Thursday at 5:00. Oh yeah, there's one. So
I haven't actually checked it out. I don't think I haven't checked out the parts where you're actually reading. I've seen bits and pieces, but
okay.
So is it entertaining for people, or is it just more like are you engaging with the audience, or is it just like like I don't even know?
No, I think I mean there's a couple of your audience members here tonight are in our streams regularly. So maybe some of you guys in the audience can chime in on what the Hebrew reading streams are like. But I like to think they're fairly interactive. They're designed for people who are already learning the languages. So, but it's fun. We usually get about we usually get about 40 people watch it. Well, I'm pretty happy about the fact that we get like 40 people coming out to watch. There we go. Vishanti says she loves the streams. So grammar nerds and language nerds unite. Yeah, it's all that. So yeah, it's fun. And some people even just come and like you, David. Like some people just come out to hang out, and they're like, I have no idea, how to read anything in the language, but they just like to hang out and they chill. So yeah, right now we're reading through we just started reading Jeremiah, and I'll just share this with you. If you don't know, Jeremiah's first vision is his very first vision is seeing an almond branch. Yahweh says to him, Jeremiah, what do you see? And Jeremiah says, I see an almond branch. And then Yahweh says, you've seen well. And then does a play on words with the word almond and says, like, my word is going to be fulfilled. But it's so funny the way it's worded. It's literally like you could tell this was Jeremiah's first try at prophecy, because he's like, I saw an almond branch. Look, there's an almond branch on this almond tree. And it means that God is going to make sure that what he tells you next time is going to come true. So Josh and I have actually just, we've started running around and just saying to each other when something's super obvious, as sure as that's an almond branch. Sorry.
That's so good.
But
that's so good.
It's fun. It's fun. So yeah, it's a fun stream. So, and I'll have some more stuff to come, and then of course Diablo Critics will be back in the second weekend of May. So,
oh wow. Okay, well let's continue on with the last part of the lecture, and then
let's talk about Adam, the herdsman. So we notice after God has planted the garden, and he says it's no good that the man is alone. And actually, I think this is one of these elements within the Genesis 1 creation story, which strongly suggests that it's in some ways responding to this story, because there's 2 times in this story. No good for who. I see that heathen queen. There's 2 times in this story where Yahweh says it's not good. What does he say over and over and over and over again in Genesis 1, David? Over and over again. He says, it says that he makes something, and then it says it was evening and morning, the 3rd day, and it was good. Over and over and over. It was good. This seems obviously in response to
I'm taking this as a compliment to the stream.
Yes, obviously that's exactly what she was getting at. So right, so the Adam, the man, is given, Yahweh God plants the garden, and then he says it's not good that the man is alone, the Adam is alone. So the Adam is given birds and animals of the field for companionship or for help. I mentioned this already. It seems a little weird, this story in which both Yahweh and the man seem to differ together, that he's unsuited for like companionship in a sexual sense with these creatures. It's implied, it's never explicitly stated, but it's there within this story. But there's a lot more to this story than that. In Genesis 2:18, Yahweh says, it's not good that the Adam is alone. I will provide for him help. Literally, it says, like his opposite. The realization is made here that the Adam and the animals are incompatible. Like they don't fit, right? But the purpose for making the animals in the first place was because the Adam needed help. What's his job? Do you remember what the Adam's supposed to be doing? What God made him for in this story? Till and to tend. Yep, looking after the garden. Yahweh at once recognizes that the Adam's station, his place, in this place, he's unable to undertake the task of working and keeping the garden with satisfaction. There's something missing here. It seems to be too much for him. So the root of the word help, that we translate help, it's ezer. It seems to have meant strength. The Ugaritic equivalent, Ugaritic is a cognate language that's very similar to Hebrew, is frequently translated as warrior or hero, and I think this provides some insight into what Yahweh believes the man needs. He needs muscle. So what does Yahweh do? It says that Yahweh God shaped from the ground all the animals of the field and every bird of the sky, and he brought them to the Adam to see what he would call each one. And whatever the Adam called each living creature, that was its name. The Adam called out the names of every livestock and bird of the sky and every wild animal. As for the Adam, he did not find help, like his opposite. So importantly, one thing I want you to note here. What's next? Okay. They're provided for the task of helping him with the garden. So the first thing I want you to notice here that's really important is that Yahweh shapes from the ground an indistinguishable menagerie of land animals and brings them to the Adam. Now, I think this is significant because he's basically repeating the pattern of making the Adam, of making the man. He made the man out of the dirt, right? Of the ground. So he's just repeating the same process. The animals are made and the birds are made out of the dirt of the ground. And then it says he brings them to the Adam to see what he would call each one. A similar sort of thing happening here is what happens in the first creation story in Genesis 1, where there's a real strong focus on compartmentalizing the animals according to their function as part of creation. However, this time, instead of God making these decisions by fiat, instead of just speaking this into existence, he brings this indistinguishable group of animals and birds to the man, and he is tasked with discovering just what it is exactly that these creatures do. So, now, the naming here is important. Names in antiquity were thought to reflect your function. Like your name was thought to project something about yourself that was meaningful to, your persona, your existence, what you do.
Not always meaningful. Wasn't someone called Hairy because he was hairy, and someone was called Heel Grower because he grabbed a heel?
Yeah. But that's very meaningful. What are you talking about?
How is that meaningful?
Very meaningful. It's very meaningful.
Okay.
By the way, so yeah, Jacob, the heel grabber also means trickster. So,
ooh, okay,
yeah, and I would say this is more of a virtuous. We tend to think of it as shady and sneaky, but I think there's a strong sense, again, playing into this sort of anti-urban polemic where all the people who are in charge are in the cities, right? There's a sense of satisfaction that people get from the trickster who bests, bests the powerful and bests those who are in control. I think this plays into some of the Jacob stories.
I'm just really working hard to try and read Jesus into all this. That's my goal.
I can see that. So this is the case with the animals too. By naming the animals, the Adam is effectively identifying their own specific tasks in existence. So once named, the land animals are then classified according to domestic versus non-domestic purpose. And you'll actually notice there's a very subtle change in which the ways the land animals are described prior to when Adam names them and afterwards. So when it says that God brings all the animals, literally the living creatures of the field, to Adam, and then after he names them, it says that Adam named all the livestock, basically. So these are, this is all about, separating those useful animals, beasts of burden, and animals that are used in the economy and in working the land and for food and those sorts of things, from all those useless animals. There was a lot of animals that just didn't seem, for the readers and the writers of the Hebrew Bible, there were a lot of animals who just their function within the created order eluded them. Like, what on earth do you do with lizards? Why are they even there, kind of thing? Or insects, or and a lot of this plays into much later the ways in which animals get classified as clean or unclean and useful, in terms of their suitability for sacrifice. So this is all tied into this idea, right? That certain animals are useful and we domesticate them, and some just aren't. And we stay away from them.
Do you have an idea of why pig was swine was forbidden?
So I actually do. I think now one of the things about I don't know if you know anything about pigs, but one of the things about pigs that's quite interesting is that they're unlike cattle and goats. They do not require a lot of space to keep and to breed. So you can keep them in enclosed spaces. And for that reason, pigs were very popular in cities in antiquity. We see this certainly in Canaan, in the Canaanites, and and especially in the Philistine cities. They kept pigs. But you see it pretty prevalently in like the Roman Empire. Pigs in the city all over the place. I think this also plays into this urban anti-urban polemic. This is where I think it starts. As people are taking themselves out of the cities and separating themselves from the cities, and they're drawing this sharp line of distinction between us outside of the cities and them in the cities. I think this plays into it, where pigs become verboten, but not necessarily because because there's anything inherently gross or dirty about them. It's just that that's what all those guys in the cities do, so we're going to stop doing that. So at least that's what I think about it.
Simone said, I think that's right. It's in the Oracle against Babylonian IIRC.
Thank you, Simone. Yeah.
What does that mean? Can you explain what that means?
I'm not entire. There's it. Would that be the Oracle in Jeremiah against Babylon? I'm asking Simone. I expect that's what she's talking about. I'd have to look it up again, but yeah. So I'm interested in that now too. Actually, going and checking that out. But I think that's a lot of what's going on there, at least where it came from. And the way these things tend to work themselves out is they develop into rituals, right? Like rituals become they basically become infused with special. They're actions that originally have some sort of practical purpose that become infused with like special meaning. This is what we see. We actually see developing, and I talk a little bit about this in the second lecture. Which would be lecture 1.2, which is actually the third lecture. But in that one, sorry, I talk about the calendar, and you can actually see this developing through the texts of the Bible, where the calendar, the festivals, start to take on new meanings over time. And a careful reader can see, like, at one point in time, something like Sukkot, the festival of booths or in gathering, was actually just like a late harvest festival. It was like the end of the growing season festival. But eventually, over time, it came to this new meaning developed for it, where this is now all about the time you were in the wilderness and you had to live in these little huts out in the wilderness. And so because of that, we're going to make this annual celebration. So and you can see this developing right through the text, like it's right in there, which I think is so cool. We have multiple places where the festivals take on different.
It's super interesting looking at the text in like chronological order. To me, I'm doing a video on apologetics, apologetics' biggest problem, and in fact, I'll hang on a sec. I'll show this is a little animation I've put together.
Or there he is. Do not believe
And
it. For
took a
false
long time,
messiahs and
it's
false prophets
it's available.
will appear and...
Wait, I'll mute it. It's available for patrons to check out at the moment in like the rough assembly cut. But it took ages to animate this and stuff. But what's super interesting is I looked at, it's about the second. There's one part that's about the second coming of Jesus, right? And what I wanted to do is I wanted to look at all the references outside of the Gospels that talk about, just imagine, let's just attribute the words to Jesus, that Jesus says, "I'm coming back soon. This generation will not pass away." And then let's look at all the references outside of the Gospels and in chronological order. And I tried to do that, and it's interesting because it sees there's a trend. And the trend is well, it's going to happen soon, and then it's even closer now than it was at the start, and then all of a sudden, right at the end in 2 Peter, it's like in the last days, scoffers will rise up, and they'll they're it's encouraging an audience of people who have had people saying, "Where's Jesus? Why hasn't he returned yet?" And then the very end, Revelations, it's come soon, Jesus comes. Yes, he's coming soon. Yes, it's a denial of it's just I'm just going to throw my hands in the air and yes, coming soon. And it's super interesting when you put it on chronological order that you can kind of
track it, right? You can track changes.
Yeah,
and you can understand them.
But it's just these trends that you kind of see between the lines, and maybe it's not best methodology or whatever, but I'm not an expert, so I can get away with being dumb. But it's just interesting. I was like, wow, this is really, really interesting to see where the church is going. Anyway,
I just think you're obsessed with Jesus. So
sorry. It's Revelation, not Revelations, as someone pointed out. Sorry.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah, keep going.
All right. We'll do a little bit more here, and then So importantly, let's maybe bring the slides back up. Naming. It's very, very, very important. Naming constitutes function. Okay. This act on its own indicates the utility of the decision to make a helper in the first place. The Adam's first order of business is to identify and to distinguish the useful animals from those which were not. Now, there's one other important regard in the mention of naming in Genesis 2:19. Whatever the Adam called each living creature, that was its name. In addition to identifying function, to name is to take ownership. So this is parallel to God's act of naming all the elements of creation in Genesis 1. I mean, that's all part of the entire process of him speaking things into existence. They become what they are because he's called them that, right? Mm-hmm. But this is an assertion of ownership. So the Adam asserts his dominion and his ownership of all the animals and the birds. So, and this is part of what's playing out in the grander biblical narrative as well. Naming is an exertion of control, and this is important too, as we come to look at the relationship between the man and the woman in the story. He not only names the woman, he names her twice. But we also need to understand what's going on. What's going on here, right? This is about the exertion of control. There's famously the fourth commandment. I think it's the fourth commandment. It's either the third or the fourth commandment of the 10 words of the 10 commandments. Is, you probably know it as you shall not take the name of the Lord in vain. We tend to think of that as like an injunction against swearing, right? That's not what that's about. This is about Yahweh protecting his own name, because the making use of a name or naming something is exercise power and control over that thing. And this is how people imagined the interaction between, you know, the divine and the human realm. You invoked the name of a god in order to get them to do something that you want them to do. So when Yahweh says you should not take up the name of Yahweh your God unnecessarily, this is what he's getting at. He's saying, don't try to control me, or don't invoke my name without a good reason, because we don't play that. So it's important. Naming constitute function, and it's an assertion of ownership. Exodus 20 verse 7. So and then all the fun stuff happens with the sex. So but I don't know how much time do we have.
Let's get onto some super chats, and just so I don't take your whole night, but it's super interesting. And again, course is amazing. Go check out the course if you want to deep dive into all of this. But we've got to have you back to. There's never a limit on the content that you can bring to this channel. So whenever you want to come back, we'll have you on, of course. And yeah,
I do want to come back and finish this because it's okay. I mean, this is the funnest stuff is definitely what happens, you know, in chapter 3 of Genesis. But
okay, all right, let's do it then.
So
we'll organize like a time right after this, and I'll get it in the calendar. I mean, we're still trying to get through that bloody apologist book as well. That
oh.
Oh god, I need to create little like sub playlists for, so people can be like, okay, where are we at, because it's like months. And well, so we have a $10 super chat from Hang for She. Thank you so much. Do you think that there is a sense here that these 4 rivers could somehow be symbolic of the 2 main arteries and 2 main veins? In other words, Tiamat's blood vessels.
Tiamat's blood vessels. I hadn't thought about that before. That's an interesting thought. I have to go back and look at this. So Hang Fishy is talking about what's going on in the Enuma Elish. So I'm gonna want to go back and take a look at that. But that's an interesting thought. Yeah. Yeah, I have to think that through.
It's not as far as Jordan Peterson goes when he says that, what is it, like the Mayans were like talking about DNA or something, like the helix, and I don't know, wild stuff. Of course, we have a happy birthday.
We did that. We can wish me a birthday again.
Yay, Nitty. Okay, so I don't know what Nitty was going on about here.
I know what he's getting on. So this is this guy from that we profiled in the Diablo Critics episode. Just David, do this. Just do like a Google image search for Jeremiah J. Johnston, and Jeremiah J. Johnston, JOHNSTON. I guess I could do it. Maybe I should do it. Because
no. Okay, yeah, I've got it.
Bring it up, and you'll see exactly what Nitty's getting at. Yeah, he's like,
so
Guy Fieri, gospel preacher plus Guy Fieri, capturing Christianity. So he did. Yes, that's go to Capturing Christianity's channel on YouTube.
Okay.
And he's got I think that's where it's either there or on Twitter. Check his channel. I'm gonna check Twitter.
Okay. This is
Nitty has it linked handy, and he can throw it in the.
I'm on
but
Christianity's channel.
He threw something in the chat.
Okay.
Nitty did. You see that?
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to. It doesn't let you. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Got it.
Oh, well, okay. Did you get it?
Okay.
There it is.
So while you're that's amazing. So
I'm so mature.
While you were talking before, I actually threw that into ChatGPT's like AI prompt, and I got this. So that's because he said AI prompt, so I was like, okay, all right.
Oh, so okay. I have to, Vishanti. I have to show this now.
Oh no,
Vishanti made a. I have to. I can find. Shoot, where the hell is it? It's on Discord, but just give me a second to pull this up. Vishanti was so inspired by my my stream yesterday that she made a meme that that was very funny. So if I'm going to try and pull this up here and show everyone. Here.
All right.
Oh, okay. I gotta. There it is. Do you see it? Yes.
That's amazing.
Sorry.
That was thank you, Nitty. That was amazing.
I'm a child.
It's so am I. Just
she said she spent
Heathen Queen. Thank you for the $5 super chat. Dr. Kip David, let's do a live stream. P.S. Ew, David, Jesus doesn't even go here. The Old Testament. I love the Mean Girls reference. Which, by the way, I'm still a fan of the original. I think the original was better than the remake.
Oh, have you seen the remake? I haven't even seen the remake. Is it any good?
Yeah. It's all right. It's just not like the original was such a classic.
I feel like so good.
I feel like the original. You need the context of the original to enjoy the second, because you don't have the context. It's kind of like the jokes don't land. But it's good. It's good.
Okay.
Well, everyone, thanks for coming out to Deep Drinks.
I was going to say though, because you bring Heathen Queen super chat back up because she said so. She said let's do a live sometime. So yeah, let's do that. If you have time between classes, between studying, between your head exploding, yeah, that could be fun.
I love that she said before that she's supposed to be doing homework, but she's
she's doing this instead.
I should be doing homework, but instead I'm drinking a cocktail and kind of shit posting on this live, and that is amazing, and we appreciate it.
It is.
I want to.
And now she's going to go back and tell Jeffrey Stackard all about what a couple of dumbasses we are. So that'll be fun.
Well, let me just say this: like, it is not lost to me how great. I'm incredibly grateful to have you on, Kip, and be able to have you on so many times, because like you're teaching university classes essentially for free on Deep Drinks, and that's like amazing, and I really appreciate you taking the time. It really does. Like when I was doing the course, when I was doing the course, that's one thing, but when I started reading the chapters that you sent me from your book, I was like, oh god damn, he can actually really write. Like, this is really well written.
Thank you.
I can understand it, and it's complex subjects. So it really, thank you so much for coming on the channel, and thank you everyone for coming out to support the channel, and go subscribe to Kip's channel, of course, as well.
Yep.
We have a bit of something new here that I've been promising for a while, but I also want to thank the archbishops of Deep Drinks. So let me just.
Oh yes, let's see it.
This is the cool meme. So archbishops of Deep Drinks. have been supporting this channel, and want to say thank you to the Archbishops, which is Jason Rollins, Matthew Monga, Digital Hammurabi, and Skeptics and Scoundrels Eric. Thank you guys so much for supporting this channel, and yeah, just being cool badasses that you are. And with that said, I'll bring this back, and we'll see everyone next week for the Trinity episode with
see you guys.
Dadpool. Bye.